there, I wanted to show you how to add length to the hem of these Great Heart skirts. So you'll need a couple of things. You'll need a seam ripper and a sewing machine and some hem tape. You can either use this lace kind, you can get this at Walmart. I picked this up this morning, it's like $1.67. And a sewing machine, and that's all you're gonna need. Well, a hand sewing needle too. So we're gonna apply this with the sewing machine, and then we're gonna hand sew this part back up to the skirt. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take all of this, we're gonna take this out, the stitching that's holding this on out, and then we're going to iron and fold this part under just barely. This is like 1/4 of an inch. So when we put the hem tape on it, that's going to give us some extra length. So this is about, let's see how wide it is. Almost 1 inch wide, so it's 3/4 of an inch wide. And it's going to add, so we're functionally going to add 1 inch to the hem. And then when we refold this down, we're actually going to gain about 1 3/4 inches extra length to the hem. So if your girls have long legs and they've just grown too fast, this buys you a little bit of time before you have to order the custom length skirts. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I have my skirt laid out here flat, and I want you to see these little stitches that are on the hem. This is inside the skirt, and there are some navy stitches, and then there are some light brown stitches, and these light brown stitches are actually, let me flip it inside out, what goes through the skirt. This is called a blind hem, and they did it with a machine, but we're just going to pick out these brown stitches. So I'm going to lay this down flat and show you how to do that. So what I do is I find a couple of them with my seam ripper, and I just kind of pull them out. So I'm only pulling out the brown thread. Now it's not a terrible thing if you pull out 1 or 2 of the blue ones, but just know that when you pull out the blue ones, then they're all going to come out. And so as I pull them out, I just kind of pick out the threads so you don't have those everywhere. And I just kind of slide my little seam ripper, you can use either side of it, underneath to catch those brown threads and pull them out. Now you can either go to the left or you can go to the right. Sometimes you get the magic thread and you can just pull and it'll pull all of it out at one time, but you can see how these they pull out really easily. What you want to make sure you do is you don't, so see how it's connected to the front there? You don't want to poke this through either of the layers of fabric. So if you're worried about poking, you can use this side of your seam ripper. And if you have done this before and you know what you're doing, you can use this side. So either way. But you'll just go all the way around the skirt, pulling out those brown threads only. Okay? And then, you know, just for neatness, you kind of want to move those out of the way. But you don't need them anymore at all, ever. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go all the way around the skirt, and then we'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've gotten all these brown fuzz, this blind hem out from the original hem. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and put this on my sewing machine. And what I'm going to do, is I'm going to apply, this is how the seam hem tape comes. I'm going to actually stitch this on from the right side, and I'm going to overlap the edge of this hem tape. Piece of white paper behind it so you can see it. This edge of the hem tape, I'm going to overlap it over that navy blue stitching that's on the edge of your skirt. So you can see what I'm doing. So this is still the inside of the skirt, so the hem was folded up this way. I'm going to put it on my sewing machine, and I'm just going to lay this. This is the right side of the skirt, so I'm going to lay this on the right side, up on the top, and then I'm going to sew a zigzag stitch actually down this edge to hold this on here, okay? And I'm going to do that all the way around. So I'm going to get my sewing machine set up, and then I will show you how I do this. Okay, so I've got my sewing machine set up right here, and I've got a zigzag stitch selected, and the zigzag is going to be pretty wide. So this is a fairly wide hem that seam that we're going to cover up right here. It's just about 1/4 of an inch, and so I'm overlapping my hem tape 1/4 of an inch just to the edge of that stitching right there, because what we're going to do is we're going to get the most possible length out of the skirt that we can right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I have my zigzag stitch set to just under 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to sew a few stitches and show you how this works. Now I've got navy blue thread, but I'm going to zoom in and see if we can get it a little bit so you'll be able to see it just a little bit better. Okay, so here we go. We're going to sew some stitches, and we're just going to sew this on all the way around. Back it up to knot those stitches at the beginning. And then I'm just going to apply this. I'm holding my skirt on with one hand, and I'm keeping the seam tape in the right place with the other. And I'm not stretching the fabric, I'm just letting the sewing machine take it in. And as long as the zigzag is catching both sides, both the skirt and the hem tape, we're good. So we're just going to go all the way around doing that. And if you're new to sewing, or if you have a sewing machine but you're not familiar, you know, haven't used it enough, I'll just give you this quick tip. So when it's a big temptation to watch where your needle is going in the fabric, but if you'll not watch the needle and watch where the fabric is going into the presser foot, you will have a straighter line actually. So since we're doing a zigzag, straightness isn't really a big deal, but it's just a tip that that helps me sew straight lines. So don't watch your needle, don't watch where your needle's going, watch where your fabric is going into the presser foot. And so that'll help you keep things lined up. And it's okay if you need to stop, because your fabric, your presser foot's holding it down and your skirt's not going to go anywhere. So you get the idea. So I'm going to stop this and then show you when it's all finished how it came out. But again, remember, I'm sewing on, you can see the fold. So this is the outside of the skirt, and I'm laying the seam tape on top of the outside, covering up the serged finished edge that we took the stitching out of. So I will be right back. Okay, so you can see we're almost back to where we started, and I have just a couple of inches left to sew on here, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to lay this hem tape overlapping where I started by about just under an inch, and then I'm going to cut it off here. Now, I don't want to do this at the beginning because the fabric could stretch a little bit, and then you'll have extra, or you won't have enough, and you'll have to piece another piece on there. But I just trimmed it off with my scissors, and this doesn't fray, so you don't have to worry about finishing that edge or anything. But we're going to just go on and then overlap where we sewed at the very beginning, and then this skirt will be ready to hand sew. Okay, so I'm coming up right here, and I'm going to make sure that I get that end attached in there. Back up a little bit just to tie that off. Okay. I'm going to trim my threads, and I'm going to show you the front and back. Trim those a little bit closer. Okay. I do not want to catch that lace and cut into it, because it's going to do a job for us. Okay. So here is the finished skirt, or the finished, we've added the seam tape all the way over. And then this is what it looks like on the back. So we had the original zigzag that was covering the edge, and you can see in white where this new zigzag is holding on the hem tape on the front. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my iron, and I'm going to press the original hem out. We're going to get rid of that original hem press, and then we're going to just barely fold the new hem under. Now I'm actually going to leave only less than 1/8 of an inch at the fold, and I'm going to let the hem tape do the work for me. So I'm going to fold this under. After I press out the hem and make this part flat, I'm going to press this under and make a new crease along this line. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to press this twice. We're going to press it once before we sew our hem tape down, and then we're actually going to press it again after we sew our hem tape down, just to make sure that we've pressed the stitches and set them into the fabric, and that everything has a nice professional finish. Okay, so if you've gotten your skirt pressed, one thing I want to caution you about if you're using this lace kind of tape, you don't want your iron too hot. You want it hot enough to press the polyester fabric and get this hem out and add a little crease right here, but you don't want to iron too hot on the lace itself. So you can iron on the outside, or you can iron very closely on the inside. If you use a flat iron, you could even use our flat iron to crease that really good for you too. But let's go ahead and get started on sewing our hem tape back up. Okay, so what I have is just a regular sewing needle. You see that? Regular sewing needle threaded with dark thread, although because of the variations in the skirt, it really doesn't matter what you use. And the stitch that I'm going to be using is a very simple stitch, so anybody can do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at one of the side seams of the skirt, just because I know that there are only two side seams. There's a left and a right in most of these skirts. And so I know that once I go past one, I'm almost back to the beginning, or I'm halfway there, and then I only have to get back to the other seam. So that's why I started a seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to sew from the inside of the skirt. So I've got my hem tape folded up to the inside of the skirt, and I'm just going to catch the whole side seam. So this part, that serge that goes all the way down to the waist of the skirt, I'm going to catch that with my needle right at the place where the hem tape comes up for the first time, or overlays it for the first time. And I'm going to go right in that same spot just about 3 or 4 times. And the reason I'm doing that is because that will secure your thread and your stitches right at the beginning and give a nice solid foundation for the rest of your stitching. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch just a thread or two from the front part of the skirt with my needle, and then I'm going to go under the hem tape. Now it doesn't matter how far into the hem tape you go, but you don't want to go too much, but this is very strong and it'll hold both. So I'm going to take just a little bit, and this is about a ½ inch between stitches, maybe just a little bit less, and I'm going to, again, I'm going to pick out with the tip of the needle, I'm going to pick a little bit from the front of the skirt, just a tiny bit. It's not very much at all. And then I'm going to move it and go back under the hem tape and grab a bit of the hem tape. Okay? And then sew that down. And if you've doubled your thread like I have, you may end up with some loops, and so you want to pull those so that those are flat as you sew and not get too far down the way with loops back there. So again, I'm going to show you again how I do it. I'm going to get a little bit of the front, just a bit, just 1 or 2 threads on my needle, and then I'm going to go through the hem tape just a bit and then pull my thread through. Let me show you what that looks like on the front of the skirt, because it's a very nice, not noticeable stitch. So on the front of the skirt, you can see there's a tiny dot where the thread came through. And if you're not trying to do it in a video, and as I'm going to be able to do it for the rest of the skirt, you'll be able to pay more attention to what you're doing and not try to get it on film. So these dots will kind of line up. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to catch them in the navy part of the plaid that goes across like that, so they won't be very noticeable at all. So maybe you can do that with yours, or if your hem falls at a different place on the plaid, just try to put it somewhere where it's inconspicuous. If you were using gold thread and because you happen to be into this gold section, that would be fine too. So on these, it really is not, because we're not making a stitch across the fabric with a sewing machine, it is okay to use gold, white, navy blue, gray. Any of those colors would be really inconspicuous. So I'm going to go all the way around with my hand sewing with my doubled thread needle, and then I will come back and I will show you how that came out. Okay, so I'm getting close to the end of my thread, and I wanted to show you how to tie off your threads and start a new, well, you'll start just like you started at the beginning, but what do you do when you run out? So I'm getting close. I have about 8 inches left, and usually I cut it too close. So I'm gonna stop when I have 6 inches left of thread. Just about that far. So I'm right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop going forward on my process, and I'm just gonna go back through the place where I just made that last stitch. And I'm gonna hold the loop that's happening there by the thread. I'm gonna hold it around a finger, and then I'm gonna take my needle and wrap it around this thread twice. So there are 2 loops, can you see that, around the needle. And then I'm going to pull my needle all the way through, and it's going to pull, 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 and tighten up into a little knot that is in the fabric now. And I'm going to do it again. So I did that one. I'm going to just go slightly to the side of that knot, go through the skirt and the hem tape, and then I'm going to catch the loop that's forming with my finger, and then make my thread spin around my needle twice, and then pull it through. Okay, that's how I make my knot. I cut it off in order not to lose my needle, which I've already done once today. I'm gonna stick it back in my fabric and then cut my threads close where it came out last, but not all the way at the knot. So I'm gonna rethread my needle and keep going around the rest of the skirt. Okay, so now we're all done. We have our hem tape sewed all the way across the inside of the skirt, and from the outside you can see what this looks like. So I'm gonna give this one more press, and then we're done with these skirts. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, or if that made sense or not, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks.